methods. All right. So I want to share that the body, if given what it needs, is able to detox very well. And I think it's a matter of understanding what exactly the body needs rather than um, try to look at something that may uh, be new and exciting that may not have any backing from sound physiology and inspiration. So make sure do your homework and be like the Bereans, right? So how not to detox, and then we'll also go into how to detox. Okay. So it's important to understand this principle that some people think when you're going through detox, you feel absolutely awful. And so, you're going to feel worse before you feel better type of thing. And you could experience maybe tiredness and, headaches, migraines, dizziness, pain here and there, diarrhea, constipation, nausea, vomiting, skin eruptions, abnormal weight gain or weight loss, these types of things. I just want to preempt this by saying that these symptoms should not be associated with a healthy detoxification. Okay, so in the process of healing, we don't want to make anyone worse. Now, there may be situations where someone has had heavy medication, for example, or they're using addictive um, narcotics or very strong medication that people may feel worse before they feel better. And that can also happen with people who are smokers. And it can even happen sometimes with people who are heavy meat eaters
All right.
or have caffeine. Caffeine can also have some of those side effects. But I just want to expel the myth that when your body is cleansing, that it doesn't have to go through a period of feeling worse before it feels better. Okay. Now, most of the time in a healthy situation, when you're not dealing with serious addictive substances, and this is not for everyone, but most of the time, people shouldn't experience bad side effects. Okay. So, there are odd times that you need to be aware of potential um, drug effects that could be being released in the body. Um, but for someone who is not experiencing those situations and has um, I'd say not severe a crisis situation, then they shouldn't be expected, put it that way. Okay. Now, I'm going to cover some of the most common methods of cleansing that particularly Seventh-day Adventists are involved with. And I want to say that this doesn't mean that there's never a place to use them, but I want to be clear when is a good time to use them. And there are certain ones I'm going to mention that actually I wouldn't encourage to use them at all, or I may recommend another method of healing. Okay, so one of the things I see a lot of is with um, wrong understandings of fasting. Okay, so let me explain to you a little bit about fasting. Now, if you read through the Councils of Spirit Prophecy, you'll find that she recommends short fasting, not long fasting. And now there may be a time and a place for that, especially if someone is going through severe grief. They've lost a loved one and maybe they can't eat for 2 or 3 days, or they're having something extremely light, or, they're having maybe a fruit fast or juice fast or even water fast for a few days may be acceptable in certain conditions like that. But um, for the most part, um, long fasts do more harm than good. Now, I want to bring something out here. Ellen White talks about true fast. Bible talks about true fast too, but it doesn't necessarily break down the physical fast of what is a true fast, more a spiritual fast. But the body can fast every day. And one of the best ways you can do that, that is non-threatening to the body and not harmful to the body, is by skipping a meal at night. So if you're going to fast, if you're going to enjoy the benefits of it, intermittent fasting is very effective if you skip a meal, especially at night, because your body doesn't need the food. It's going to retire. Usually, most of us are sedentary workers. We use our brains more than our bodies. And so, for those types of individuals, we don't need um, a lot of extra calories. In fact, in the United States, the average person could cut back 30 to 40% of their calories, and that would imply skipping a meal. A lot of Americans are on 2 meals a day anyway, but they skip the most important time, which is breakfast. So I tell people to eat their supper for breakfast. Okay, so skip the meal at night, and intermittent fasting is very healthy for the body, and it does activate the white blood cells. It helps with repair because it gives the body a chance to spend its energy and divert its energy into repair and building up the body and cleansing the body. All right, so that is very, very important. Um, but I wouldn't encourage, uh, just as a general rule, I wouldn't encourage a long water fast or juice fast. I'll get into juice in a little bit. That's probably one of my next topics. Um, but you don't want to put yourself in a situation also where your body is setting itself up for cravings, okay? And if you look at a lot of the diets online to lose weight, they often, focus on caloric restriction. And this often sets our bodies up for cravings, all right? Because we're just not getting enough of what the body needs. So the body is telling the brain you need to eat, and it sets up cravings for us to eat more. And one of the side effects of having long fasts is that you end up binge eating when you finish. And, it takes a lot of self-control to go through a fast, but it takes just as much self-control to break a fast. And so a lot of people, when they finish a fast, they do it very abruptly, and their body is not ready for it. In fact, the stomach shrinks over a few days of fasting, and it's not prepared to handle the same amount of quantity of food. So just be aware of that if you plan on doing that. But my suggestion to people is to just skip a meal at night. That would be the best way um, to fast, because the body has a regular break every day. And there are a lot of studies out there showing that 2 meals a day is better than three. Longevity studies show that those who eat less caloric, you know, or, or or engage in more caloric restriction have longer and healthier lives. And this can also stimulate what we call the mast cells. And this is particularly good for people who have atherosclerosis. So when you get a lot of plaque buildup in your blood vessels, if you fast, you activate the mast cells. And these are part of the immune cells that are actually located, they're embedded in the lumen of the blood vessels, and they're activated through fasting, and they can eat up and gobble up the fat deposits and plaque buildup in the arteries. So that's an excellent way to do it, is to skip a meal at night. All right. And if you're going to do a juice fast, um, this is very hard on the body because you're pumping a lot of sugar into the body in one short burst. And I'm not against the occasional juice. Jesus had grape juice, and that was very it's very good for the body because it has galactic acid, oxalic acid, which helps improve digestion. And that's why in the book of Timothy, the Apostle Paul encouraged Timothy to take a little wine, which we know is grape juice, for his stomach, which grape juice is good and fruit juices have a place, but one of the things I see um, certain health individuals doing, medical missionaries doing, is they load people up with too much juice. All right, so I'm not talking about an occasional juice. I'm talking about using it as a therapy. So there's a particular ministry. It's not Adventist, but it's called the Gerson therapy. And if you go over there, um, they'll give you like 8 glasses of fruit or vegetable juice a day, and then 3 meals on top of that. So it's not what we call a temperate program. We're told that digestion commences in the mouth. Sufficient time is seldom given to the period of eating, and the slower the process, the better will be of digestion. So there's no teeth in your stomach. So this is where digestion starts, up here in the mouth. So when you take a lot of juice, you're putting a lot of fluid in your stomach in a very short amount of time. Now, fiber is not just a broom. I just want to make this clear. Often the reason that juicing is advocated is to get the enzymes. I just want to make it clear that enzymes from fruit juice do not go into the body as enzymes. Enzymes are two big particles. They're made of proteins, and those proteins are made of amino acids. And if you take in those enzymes, the body has to break them down, and then they go through the intestinal villi as amino acids. And then the body, as long as it has the right amino acid pool, it can reconstitute enzymes. And so you don't need to get large amounts of fruit juice to get the enzymes that you need. Um, so, oh, okay. Excuse me 1 second here. I've just got to get my car key to someone. All right. Okay. So we need we need fiber, and the reason we need fiber is because fiber helps to slow down the release of sugar into the bloodstream. And this is really essential, especially for people who are diabetics. When you get too much rush of sugar into the body, it can spike the blood sugar. So fiber is not just a broom. It helps not just with releasing of blood sugar or slowing down the transit time of blood sugar, but it also acts as a cleanser. In fact, this is often how the body deals with toxins. It actually binds them to fiber, and the fiber, it takes it out of in the bowel through the fecal matter. So fiber is one of the best cleansing agents you can possibly consume. Another thing fiber does, it is involved with manufacturing the microbiome, which is so important for intestinal absorption, and it's so important for the immune system. And this is why we have so many people who have problems with their intestines, and they can't absorb very well, they can't digest very well. It's because they don't have enough fiber. They also may be consuming antibiotics, and that has very detrimental effects to the body's natural microbiome. And there's other medications and chemicals that can impact that as well. But fiber is essential to getting proper absorption, detoxification, and elimination. So don't skip on that. Um, you know, if you're gonna have a juice, it's better. Now there are some juicers, should I say, that actually mix the fiber with the actual juice. And so that would actually be a healthier option than just taking that as fruit juice straight into the body. And just keep in mind, we're not talking about the occasional juice. We're talking about using juice in large amounts in cases of helping people recover from chronic diseases. So be careful with juicing. It has a place more as a nice beverage. Actually, Ellen White used to have orange juice occasionally. or lemon juice on summer days, she said, on hot summer days. That's a good time to have a juice. Um, all right, and another thing that I want to mention is about certain hydrotherapy treatments, one of which I see a lot of people get involved with is the use of colonics. Now, um, I'll read a quote actually. Let me see. I think I've got it here. All right, there is a quote. If you have access to the Spirit of Prophecy CD-ROM, just type in the word rectum and you'll find a couple of quotes there. And I think it's really interesting what she has to say about that. And I'll read this quote here. It says, there are men who make a specialty of treating the rectum, and some feel that they have been greatly benefited. But I have been instructed that this treatment, as well as many surgical operations, leaves with many a serious weakness. Now, Dr. Harvey Kellogg, he specialized in colonics, colonic irrigation treatments. And it's interesting, this was actually in reference to that. Um, and so when you take a large volume of water in your bowels, okay, there are repercussions to that. Now, I know that the belief is that we're trying to get rid of all the caked feces in the inside lining of the bowel, and I understand the philosophy of that. Okay. Now the bowel should not be compacted. All right, there shouldn't be any blockages there. Um, but at the same time, you need to be aware of some of the effects of this. Okay, now there are 6 valves in the GI tract, one of which is called the ileocecal valve. And between the small intestine and the large intestine, you have this ileocecal valve. So think of it as a door that opens one way. It's like a hinge and it opens one way. So usually people's houses, we have one-way doors. So, it's designed for that purpose of one way. You don't put pressure the other way. So if you put large amounts of water into the rectum, you're actually going against the flow of nature and you're pushing against this ileocecal valve. Now, the danger of that is that you can weaken the valve and you can push it back against its own hinge, so to speak, and you can cause the flora that is in the large bowel to be displaced and go into the small intestines. And we call this dysbiosis. It's a migration of bacteria or microflora in an area that it does not belong. Okay, so there are nutrients that only take place in absorption in the small intestine. There are nutrients that only take place to be absorbed in the large intestine, and so it's important that you don't cause a disruption in migration of those bacteria. And one of the problems with the colonic therapy, it can cause that. Now, as we read, it says it may have benefited. It may seem to benefit some people. So you may feel, oh, well, I feel better. Maybe you felt like you had more energy or something, or better bowel movements. But then later it creates serious weakness. Now, another problem with having regular colonics is that it weakens the muscles that actually cause peristaltic motion in the large bowel. And over time, um, because they're not being used, because the colonic treatment is causing large volumes to come out without requiring the contractibility of those muscles, then it can lead to weakening of those muscles. And I have seen people who cannot have a bowel movement. They're dependent on these colonics to do that. Another thing that you need to keep in mind is that you're putting Oftentimes it depends on the actual colonic that's being done. But I was trained in colonic therapy, by the way, years ago, and we would put 20 liters of water, 20 liters of water into the colon. Okay, now that wasn't in one go. That was several different times within about 30-minute period. And when you put in that much water into the bowel, now absorption of water takes place in the large bowel, plus electrolytes, and there's certain nutrients that get absorbed through the large bowel. And so what ends up happening is you've got a large volume of water going through the bowel, and you can dilute the electrolytes in the body. And especially with people with heart rhythm problems, things like that, it can cause massive disruption to those electrolytes, and it could cause nervous related issues. Okay, so just be aware of that. And then another thing too is that sometimes because of the pressure that's used, and as we get older, our bowels get thinner. So the wall in the bowel, in the rectum in particular, it gets thinner, which means it's more liable for perforation. And I gave a talk on this years ago when I was at Wildwood, and I had a colonic therapist who came to my talk, and she said, "You're dead right." She said that I've seen perforated bowels, and she's done thousands of colonic treatments. And so you need to be aware that that could be a problem. If you put a hole in someone's bowel, then that will cause fecal contamination and can set someone up for a severe infection. So uh, just be aware about that. And also some of the tips that are used, they can be very sensitive to people and could cause a reaction. Um, and I just think it is much safer to use water the other way. Now, let's take an instance where someone is compacted. It would be more appropriate to use an enema than a colonic because one, it's gentler on the system. You're not using as much water, and you don't need to use a lot of water. If you use warm water as an enema, it is much better for your health, and it won't cause perforation. You won't have all the problems with electrolytes and all the other things I mentioned. In fact, at one time, Ellen White had a syringe enema for 4 weeks because of back pain. And so it helped her. And in cases where you have fecal compaction, this could be a better way to go, okay, than taking a colonic with a lot of fluid. All right, so there are other things we could talk about, but I think there are the main ones that you need to be aware of. Um, and it's more natural. It's more natural. God designed it that way, all right, for water to go from the mouth through through the body, and what is needed for that fecal matter to consolidate and also provide a lubrication to the bowel to get it out there. In fact, a lot of people have constipation because they're not drinking enough water. And if you take warm water in the morning, if you got constipation, take some warm water in the morning. That's one of the best ways to get the bowels moving. All right. So another thing that I'll mention, a lot of people are getting involved in these liver and gallbladder flushes. Um, and what they do is they use um, olive oil with some lemon juice. Okay, now I'm not against lemon juice or good wholesome olive oil. But often it's in large quantities. So, for example, a cup of olive oil with maybe two lemons or juice from 2 lemons, and put that in the body to flush out these gallstones. All right, and what ends up happening is people will actually, I've met people, they swear that they went to the bathroom the next day and all these balls came out. And I don't disbelieve them for 1 minute, but I believe that they were not gallstones. I believe they were self-created. So when you take large amounts of olive oil or any type of oil in your stomach, the body has to deal with that oil. So what happens? How does it deal with that oil? It has to break it down so it uses an emulsifying agent. And so it uses the bile salts. Okay, so the cholesterol that is produced by the liver that's stored in the gallbladder, um, this actually emulsifies the fats. And so what happens when you put large amounts of oil in the body is it requires large amounts of cholesterol. And this can create, with the acidic nature of the lemon juice, it can actually form these little balls. And they can give the appearance that they are gallstones. And if it is a gallstone, by the way, it won't float. It will be like a rock, and it will be at the bottom of the toilet. All right. And they are generally painful, not as painful as kidney stones. Kidney stones are extremely painful. But what I'm telling you is that this is something that's been created by the actual treatment. It's not actually cleansing the body of all these stones. All right, now we can talk about this a bit later, how to get rid of these stones naturally. Okay. Again, it all comes back to understanding the body's physiology and how it works, and how the body uses different enzymes, and the cause and effect relationship in the body. It's just really good to understand basic what we call applied physiology. If you want to learn, I would suggest you there's a applied physiology manual that I used to teach from at Wildwood Lifestyle Center Hospital. And I think they sell it at the bookstore. If any of you are interested, that would be a great resource to get. Um, all right, another one is saltwater cleanses. And I have seen dozens of people go on this program and have very severe long-term permanent effects from this. Now, the body can die from 50 grams of sodium a day. Very, very toxic to the nervous system. There are some individuals in Japan, especially in some of these places that have eat a lot of fish that have up to 30 grams of salt a day, which is extremely high. And salt is important for the body. I'm not suggesting that we don't use salt, but I certainly wouldn't recommend saltwater cleanses. I remember when I was in Australia, there was a lot of different people got involved with saltwater treatments where they would get 2 liters of this salt water. Now, well, actually, a third of it was from the ocean. So the other 2/3 was water. So basically, the ocean has about 5% of salt in it. So if you took a liter of salt water, you would be taking about 50 grams of salt from that, and that could be enough to kill you. And this is often how people die when they're desperate for water and they take salt water, and it just speeds up their demise. Of course, for every gram of salt you take in your body will actually hold on to 70 grams of fluid. And so this is why it's important to actually get rid of excess sodium in the body. And this leads to edema, it leads to weight gain. A lot of people they can lose a lot of weight when they get rid of some of excess sodium. When I used to work at the Lifestyle Center at Wildwood, often people go on a 3-week program, and some large individuals, maybe 300-400 pounds, would say they've lost 20 pounds of weight and they think it's 20 pounds of fat. It was only maybe 2 or 3 pounds of fat and 18 pounds of fluid because they were eating, good diet, restricted salt, high in potassium, and of course, when you're high in potassium, that flushes out excess sodium and that flushes out water. Um, so it's important that we don't have too much salt. We do need some, but we can run into more problems if we take too much salt. Um, and also, I recommend that you use things like the Himalayan salt or rock salt. Those are two of the best ones. We generally use the Himalayan salt, and it's got over 80 trace minerals in there. So that's very, very healthy salt. In fact, Jesus said, "You're the salt of the earth," right? He didn't say salt of the ocean. Okay. And that's where they used to get it from, slabs of salt from the salt beds in the Middle East that were very expensive, that were traded um, across the nations. So, and that's where the word salary came from. They used to exchange salt. Um, anyway, I digress. But I would just advise don't use large amounts of salt, especially for cleansing. I worked at this lifestyle center for a little bit in Australia, and they use these saltwater cleansers. And I remember one of the therapists said, "You ought to see what happens in the toilet afterwards. Big explosions, and I can imagine because it's very, very abrasive, and the body's trying to get rid of it as quickly as possible, and it's trying to maintain homeostasis, and so it just gets the bowels working because it's trying to get that stuff out, and that doesn't mean that it's cleansing the bowel. Okay, the bowel is getting rid of the salt. Another thing I want to mention is about essential oils. Okay, now um, essential oils are very effective, and we use them a lot. And I'm a big believer in essential oils. We use them topically. I like to use them with carrot oils. You can use them in diffusers. They're excellent to just breathe in. All right, your body has receptors. Every cell in your body has aromatic receptors that can pick up odors, and they can have very powerful therapeutic effects upon the body. But I'm not a fan of taking essential oils internally. And I've been to some I won't name names, but big essential oil company um, salesmen or saleswomen women, and they'll tell you that this is the only true essential oil. It's therapeutic grade. It's the only one you can take internally. And if it's pure, completely pure, therapeutic grade, nothing been added or taken away, then it's safe to use internally. And this is simply not true. And I'll tell you why. Um, one of the reasons is because in nature, the essential oil is in a very low concentration. Now, the reason essential oil is used by the plant is because it's powerful in its effects of repelling insects. A lot of these essential oils that the plant uses is actually a natural pesticide, insecticide, herbicide. And so they're trying to protect themselves basically by giving off these aromatic fragrances. Sometimes they're actually used to attract certain insects, but most of the time they're used as a self-defensive mechanism. And we often look at them as like the immune system of the plant, and they're high in phytochemistry, and they're very powerful and they work really well. But when you take 1,000 pounds of plant matter and you concentrate it and you get 1 pound of oil out of it, these are not regular oils like carrier oils. They are what we call volatile oils. Okay, they're made of alcohols and esters and monoterpenes, and they're made of these highly sophisticated therapeutic compounds they're very reactive, and they can be very caustic as well. So, I've seen people take 4 or 5 drops of oregano oil and end up in the ER as a result of that. I've worked with essential oils, and they'll dissolve plastic. They're very strong. Even putting on your skin, sometimes they can cause rashes. They can cause severe burns on the skin because they're very, very strong. And so I recommend that they be diluted. And your gastric acid is really not designed to deal with essential oils. All right. And so even though it sells more oil and it may bring some of these companies a lot more profits, I don't believe that they should be taken that way. There may be rare exceptions to that, but as a general rule, I would discourage anyone from taking essential oils internally, especially on a regular basis. All right. There are some oils, for example, citrus oils that are pressed, they're not distilled. Um, a lot of people think that the oils we have today are the same oils as we have in biblical times. They're completely different. They're through a distillation. Distillation didn't take place till 11th century in Persia, so they've separated the volatile oils from the plant in high concentration. So just because something is natural doesn't mean it's good for us, right? I mean, lead is natural, mercury is natural, arsenic's natural, even death is natural. So you know, yes, they have their place, and I'm not saying they're like arsenic in the fact that they're toxic, but in large amounts in the body, they can be. So just use a bit of common sense, and I would recommend use them with in a diffuser or topically with a carrier oil. That's the best way to do that. Okay. So some other treatments. How much time do I have before Q&A? I'm sorry, I just want to make sure I'm not overstepping my
No,
time boundary.
you're not overstepping. Yes,
Okay, can I go another 10 minutes?
yes, you can.
Okay, great, great. Thank you. So some of the other treatments you need to be guarded about are things that can be very taxing to the body. Okay, for example, like fever baths. So I've seen a lot of people have fever baths, and uh, fever baths create a situation where you're basically creating an artificial fever. You're raising the body temperature to activate white T cells, killer T cells. All right, so you're trying to activate the body's natural immunity. But you need to keep in mind that, some people are too weak. They're too enervated to have a fever bath, right? So let's say they're coming off some heavy medication. Um, they've been on um, some very serious medication, all right? Or they've been on some heavy painkillers. And now, when I said to you before that, the body um, is continually cleansing itself and detoxing itself, right? That doesn't mean that there are no toxins anywhere in the body. Now, I want to qualify this because a lot of people think that there's like pounds of toxins like in the liver, for example. Okay, now the liver, it does not store toxins. Now, this may be a surprise to many of you. If you take a drug in your body, it goes through the liver, and the liver converts it to a water-soluble substance, and it excretes it. It gets rid of it. All right, so it doesn't actually hold it in the liver, right? Now, the body can store some toxins, and usually they're stored in fat cells. All right, and fat cells encapsulate a lot of toxins, and they can be there for years. And when you have something like a fever treatment or a sauna, or you're in a sweat cabinet, you're sweating, all right, high intensity, this can release some of those because it can cause some of those fat cells to basically give up the goods, right? Because it's breaking down some of these fat cells. And so you can actually feel the experience of that toxic substance on your tongue. Like There's been people that have had pesticide poisoning 40 years ago, and they go through this detox situation, and it ends up on their tongue, and they can taste that chemical years and years later. All right, so there are uh, situations where the body does store, and it can also store heavy metals as well. There are parasites that can be in the body for many years, right? So there's definitely garbage in there, right? So we're not denying that, but at the same time, you need to know how the body deals with it, right? And what is necessary to activate those processes of detoxification and elimination. And so once you understand that, then you're more capable to use effective, safe, and mild to moderate methods that aren't going to cause debilitation or taxation on the system. So when you give someone a fever bath and you elevate their temperature, and let's say they're 75 years of age and they have Lyme's disease or some other, condition that's bears heavy upon their body, takes a lot of energy from them. This can be very crippling to them, and it can take them a long time to recover from the treatment. All right, so you need to take into consideration the person's vitality. Now, keep in mind that the body uses up about 30% of its energy every day in maintaining body temperature. And this particularly applies to the skin, all right, because any threat to whether it be cold or hot to the skin, it can awaken an immune response and it can cause a lot of um, energy, not just from the immune system, but the blood has to go to the skin in order to reduce the temperature. That's how the body works. It's continually trying to protect itself. And so it may put more stress on the circulation system, and it may take resources and energy from other parts of the body that can fight disease. So anytime that you are working with someone where you're giving them a treatment that is very taxing, you need to take into consideration the person's age, the person's condition, um, and their response, because not everyone can take the same amount of heat, not everyone can take the same amount of cold. So it's important to keep that in mind. This is why it's not a cookie cutter program. You have to be really tuned into the spirit to ascertain how much people can take of certain treatments. And sometimes, I may not recommend a treatment. In fact, I've worked with certain people that I may not recommend a herb to them. I deal with herbs all the time because their body is so it's just not able to handle that at this point. We work on the laws of health. We get them in a safe place. Sometimes people aren't in a safe place to use some of these treatments. um Most people, they are okay, and I even work with people that are in serious conditions, but I do it with understanding, knowing what I'm doing is not going to put them into a jeopardizing situation. Okay, so just be aware of that. Anytime you use some type of aggressive treatment, and I'm not a big fan of aggressive treatments, there may be a place for certain individuals, but you have to take into account these other factors, and you have to also take into account their mind, right? So is it going to create stress on their mind? I mean, I gave a fever treatment, a fever bath to a 19-year, I think he was about 19, 20 years of age. He was coming off some addictive substance. He could handle about 15 minutes. That's the most he could take. Um, Now in a healthy young person, it shouldn't be a problem, but for him it was. So make sure that you don't you cause more problems than you're trying to solve. And sometimes treatments that are entered into without taking into consideration the person's sensitivities can cause more problems than it can help. Even with things like charcoal and clay, and I'm a big fan of charcoal and clay, believe me, I don't know anyone that promotes them as much as I do. Um, but you have to take into account, the person's situation. Like charcoal is very binding. It can cause it's cleansing. It's a very good detoxing agent, but it can if you take it too often, and too much, it can lead to constipation. It can also affect micronutrient absorption, and it will definitely interfere with drug medication. And just be aware of when not to use these things as well. Same with clay. Clay is even more constipating than charcoal. Now, clay works better than charcoal um, externally, and charcoal works better than clay internally. But you don't want to use charcoal or clay long term. They're short-term methods, okay? And be careful that you understand about, the interactions that they can have upon the body. And I just want to leave quickly by talking about herbs because a lot of people use herbs in a way that can be detrimental. I'm not a big fan of using herbs in a powdered form in a capsule or compressed tablet. You have poor absorption, and often the capsules or tablets you buy do not even have one of the original ingredients in. There was a study down out of New York that showed that over 62% of supplements that were studied uh, had one or more ingredients missing. Some had zero of the ingredients that were listed on the label. So just be aware about the sources. Herbs are not a substitute for poor lifestyle habits. They're to be used intelligently, we're told, and there's nothing miraculous about them. And I don't load people up with 20 different herbs a day. I want people to do it safely. I don't want to use any herb that's going to have a negative reaction or herb drug interaction. I also don't want to use herbs that have any side effects or known toxicity or any addictive ability or psychotropic elements to it. So just be aware of the herbs that you're working with and how they work. Herbs are not, there's no magic about it. All they're doing is giving back to the body vitamins, minerals, and phytochemistry that the body has lost through the disease process. So they're a great way to build up the body if used in the correct way. But they're often used incorrectly and produce more side effects. And you have to know about dosage, how much to take, how long do you take the herb. And there's a science that goes into it, and there's a practicality and common sense approach that goes into it. So I'm sorry my time's up. I could be dribbling all night about these things, but I know you've got some questions, so I just wanted to give some time to you all to cover. And this is certainly by no means an exhaustive, and I feel like I've just scratched the surface here, but I just wanted to add a little caution to some of the ways we're using some of these things that could end up becoming a reproach upon God's methods. And when they're used correctly, they can be a great blessing. But if not used correctly, it could create more problems. And we don't want to certainly do that. We want to be God's agents of healing, and we want to be the balm that the Lord can use to bring about restoration. So I'll I'll leave you, Dr. Ephraim, to throw me some Q&A from the chat room, or anyone that's asking. I'll just stop and let you talk now. Okay.
Okay, thank you so much for a well-informative presentation. You know what? Someone said I'm extremely grateful for this presentation, and I totally agree with that individual. We have a